Rebirth and Samsara explained. Discover Buddhism wisdom to break the cycle of rebirth. Life is a journey, not a destination. This quote, often attributed to the wisdom of Buddhist thinking on samsara, perfectly captures the essence of today's topic. Buddhism teaches us that life, in its very core, is a flow, a cycle, a never-ending journey where one chapter ends and another begins. This journey is what Buddhists call samsara, the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. It's a continuous loop that we're all part of, moving from one life to the next, shaped by our actions, our intentions, and the quality of our minds. But you might wonder, why does this matter? What relevance does a cycle that spans countless lives have in our everyday lives here and now? Well, that's where the true beauty of understanding samsara comes in. The more we grasp this cycle, the more we can see that every thought, every word, and every action we take has meaning and consequence. We're not just living a single life, we're participating in an infinite journey, one that goes far beyond what we see in our present existence. Understanding this concept doesn't just make life feel richer or more meaningful, it opens us to a world of compassion and wisdom. When we realize that everyone around us is also caught in this cycle, struggling, suffering, and hoping just as we are, we start to see each other differently. This realization plants the seeds of kindness, patience, and connection, helping us to live with a little more empathy and a lot more purpose. In today's video, we'll explore these profound concepts of rebirth and samsara. These ideas might seem distant or complex, but I want to break them down in a way that feels approachable and engaging. Think of it as a conversation about life, about why we're here, and how we can live in a way that not only lightens our own journey but maybe brightens the paths of others, too. By the end of this discussion, my hope is that you'll feel inspired to look at life a little differently, with a perspective that embraces the journey, not just the destination, and to see each moment as an opportunity to shape not only this life but also the ones yet to come. Core concepts of samsara and rebirth in Buddhism. Samsara is this core idea in Buddhism that represents the endless cycle we're all moving through: birth, life, death, and then, birth again. Imagine life as a giant wheel, constantly turning, with each of us moving through it over and over. This isn't just one life, one chance, one moment, it's a journey we're continuously on. And here's the key part of samsara that makes it different from a more straightforward view of life: it's seen as a cycle of suffering. Why? Because we're bound to it by attachment, desire, and ignorance. We're constantly seeking things, constantly wanting, holding on, feeling dissatisfied, and never quite reaching a lasting peace. This state of craving and clinging keeps us in samsara, endlessly repeating the cycle as long as we're attached to this world and the things in it. Each desire, each attachment, keeps that will turning and ties us to this continuous cycle of suffering. Now, the way we experience samsara is deeply influenced by our actions, what Buddhists call karma. Karma, in Buddhism, is the energy created by every action we take, whether it's physical, verbal, or even mental. It's not just about good or bad deeds as we might usually think, it's more about the intentions and the energy behind those actions. Every action leaves a mark, creating a cause that will eventually have its effect. So, if we act with kindness, compassion, and wisdom, we're creating positive karma, which leads to favorable outcomes in future lives. But if our actions come from a place of anger, greed, or selfishness, that creates negative karma, which eventually brings about suffering for us down the line. Karma is like planting seeds. What we plant now shapes what we'll experience in future lives. It's this continual shaping of our journey in samsara, where each action builds upon the last, creating the path ahead of us. And this leads us to rebirth, the way Buddhism explains what happens after death. In Buddhism, rebirth isn't the same as reincarnation as it's understood in many other traditions. It's not the same, you coming back again and again. Instead, think of it like a flow of energy, where consciousness continues but isn't tied to a permanent, unchanging soul. It's more like a candle lighting another candle, the flame continues, but it's not the same exact flame. Your actions, your karma, shape this flow, influencing where and how you're reborn. This isn't limited to just being reborn as a human either. Buddhist teachings describe different realms of existence, each shaped by our karma. There's the human realm, where we have the unique chance for growth and understanding, the animal realm, where life is driven more by survival, the celestial realms, where beings might experience joy and ease but are still within samsara, and other realms associated with suffering. Where we end up is the result of our karma, and the cycle keeps turning until we break free from samsara entirely by overcoming attachment, desire, and ignorance. This is the goal of Buddhist practice, liberation, or nirvana, which is the escape from this endless cycle. Why we are trapped in samsara. So, why do we keep getting caught in samsara? Why do we find ourselves living out life after life, facing suffering, and never quite breaking free? In Buddhism, this entrapment is largely due to what's called the three poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance. Think of these as core forces that cloud our minds and keep us from understanding our true nature. They bind us to the cycle of rebirth and suffering, pulling us back into samsara again and again. Let's break down these three poisons, starting with greed. Greed isn't just about wanting material things or wealth, it's any form of attachment where we cling tightly to things, people, or outcomes. This craving leads us to always chase what we don't have, leaving us in a state of constant dissatisfaction. It's the endless more that we believe will make us happy, but it never really does. This greed, this attachment, pulls us deeper into samsara, creating karma that keeps the wheel of rebirth turning. Then there's hatred. When we hold on to anger, resentment, or hostility, we're only harming ourselves. Hatred blinds us to compassion and empathy, fueling actions that bring about more suffering, both for ourselves and others. This anger can become a deeply rooted part of our lives, leading us to actions that create negative karma. As a result, we find ourselves trapped in cycles of bitterness and conflict, reborn again with those unresolved feelings, unable to escape from the effects of our own anger. The third poison, ignorance, is perhaps the most fundamental trap in samsara. Ignorance here isn't just a lack of knowledge, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of reality. It's the mistaken belief that we are permanent, separate beings, which leads us to cling to the ego and pursue desires that reinforce this false sense of self. Ignorance keeps us from seeing that everything is interconnected and impermanent, and it's this misunderstanding that ultimately binds us to samsara. Without clear understanding, we continue to make choices based on attachment and aversion, which inevitably leads us back into the cycle of rebirth. Closely tied to these poisons is the idea of attachment and desire. In Buddhism, attachment to worldly things, whether it's possessions, relationships, or even ideas about who we are, keeps us locked into samsara. The more we desire, the more we suffer when we can't have what we want or when things don't go our way. Even when we do get what we want, the happiness is fleeting, because eventually, we either lose it, grow tired of it, or realize it doesn't satisfy us the way we thought it would. This endless loop of wanting, getting, and then wanting again is what creates the suffering that keeps us bound to the cycle of rebirth. And this brings us to the Buddhist concept of suffering, or dukkha. Dukkha is not just physical pain or sadness, it's the pervasive sense of dissatisfaction that arises from living in samsara. Life in samsara is inherently marked by suffering, because everything is impermanent, and everything we try to hold on to eventually slips away. Recognizing this truth is the first step in understanding why Buddhists seek liberation from samsara. This understanding of suffering and the path to transcend it is beautifully laid out in the Buddha's foundational teachings known as the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths begin with the acknowledgement that suffering is a natural part of life. But the Buddha doesn't stop there. He goes on to explain the cause of this suffering, our attachment and craving, and shows us that there's a way to overcome it. The fourth noble truth, the Eightfold Path, offers practical steps to end suffering by cultivating wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. These teachings form a path that, if followed, can help us free ourselves from the chains of samsara, leading to a state of liberation, or nirvana. The path to liberation, escaping the cycle of samsara. Now that we've explored the reasons we're trapped in samsara and how attachment, desire, and ignorance keep us bound to the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth, let's talk about the path to liberation, the way out of this never-ending cycle. In Buddhism, the ultimate goal is to attain nirvana, a state of peace and freedom from suffering. But what does nirvana really mean, and how do we get there? Nirvana is often described as the end of samsara, the end of the cycle of rebirth. It's the state where suffering ceases completely, and one is free from the bonds of craving, hatred, and ignorance. It's not just about escaping pain, but about realizing the true nature of life, understanding that everything is impermanent and interconnected, and no longer needing to cling to things that cause us suffering. In nirvana, there is no more attachment to the self, no more desire for things or outcomes, because you've reached a place of ultimate peace and wisdom. You're no longer bound by the forces that keep you in the cycle of suffering. So, how do we reach nirvana? The Buddha outlined a clear and practical path for us to follow, which is known as the Noble Eightfold Path. This path isn't just a set of abstract ideas, it's a guide to living ethically, cultivating a clear mind, and developing wisdom. It's the path to enlightenment, and every step helps us move away from the ignorance and attachments that keep us in samsara. Let's break down the Eightfold Path. First, right understanding is about seeing the world as it truly is. It's understanding the nature of suffering, its causes, and the possibility of liberation. This is where we begin, by recognizing that life is full of challenges, and that suffering is a part of the human experience. But it's also about understanding that we have the ability to overcome suffering and break free from the cycle of samsara. Next, right intention is all about our motivation. It's the decision to live with compassion, kindness, and a genuine desire to help others. The intention behind our actions determines whether they lead us toward liberation or further into samsara. Right intention involves cultivating thoughts of love and generosity, and abandoning harmful thoughts like anger, greed, and hatred. Right speech is another essential part of the Eightfold Path. What we say has a powerful impact on our lives and the lives of others. Right speech involves speaking truthfully, kindly, and with respect. It means refraining from gossip, lies, and hurtful words. By practicing right speech, we start to cultivate a more peaceful and harmonious way of interacting with the world around us. Then, right action focuses on ethical behavior. This involves refraining from actions that harm others, like killing, stealing, or engaging in sexual misconduct. Right action is about living with integrity, making choices that align with our values and the teachings of the Buddha. By acting ethically, we create positive karma and move closer to liberation. Right livelihood is about making a living in a way that doesn't cause harm to others. This means choosing a profession that is ethical, that supports our well-being and the well-being of others. It's about aligning our work with our values, and not pursuing a career or livelihood that involves causing harm, deceit, or exploitation. Right effort is about cultivating a positive, focused mind. It's the effort to abandon unwholesome qualities like anger and greed, and to develop wholesome qualities like kindness, generosity, and patience. Right effort requires discipline, but it's a discipline that is rooted in love and care for oneself and others. Right mindfulness is the practice of being fully aware and present in every moment. It's about observing our thoughts, feelings, and actions without judgment, and being conscious of how our minds influence our behavior. Mindfulness helps us recognize the sources of our suffering and detach from them. It's a crucial step towards seeing the world clearly, free from the illusions of attachment and desire. Finally, right concentration is the practice of deep meditation. It's the ability to focus the mind in a single, clear direction, without distraction. Through concentration, we can gain profound insights into the nature of reality and develop a deep understanding of the impermanence of all things. This deep level of concentration allows us to break through the layers of ignorance and attachment, leading us toward liberation. But it's not just about following a set of steps, it's also about developing meditation and wisdom as tools to help us on this path. Meditation is a key practice in Buddhism because it helps us cultivate mindfulness and gain insight into the nature of our minds. Through meditation, we can observe our thoughts and emotions without becoming attached to them. It's a powerful tool to help us detach from the sources of suffering that keep us trapped in samsara. At the same time, wisdom, particularly wisdom about the nature of suffering and impermanence, is essential for liberation. We need to understand the root causes of our suffering and how they can be overcome. Wisdom helps us see through the illusions of the self and recognize that everything is interconnected and impermanent. It allows us to cultivate compassion and insight, leading us toward a deeper understanding of reality and the cessation of suffering. Together, meditation and wisdom are like the two wings of a bird. They work hand in hand to help us rise above the cycle of samsara. Through mindfulness and meditation, we develop the wisdom needed to break free from the three poisons and the attachments that bind us to the endless cycle of rebirth. By following the Noble Eightfold Path and cultivating meditation and wisdom, we can begin to free ourselves from samsara. It's a gradual process, and it requires effort, discipline, and a commitment to living in harmony with the Buddhist teachings. But with each step we take, we move closer to the ultimate goal, Nirvana, the cessation of suffering and the end of the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Practical applications for modern life. Now that we've discussed the path to liberation and how it leads us toward freedom from samsara, let's take a moment to reflect on how understanding samsara and rebirth can deeply impact our lives today. We live in a world where we often get caught up in the stress, chaos, and struggles of daily life. But when we bring the wisdom of samsara into our awareness, it can change how we see the challenges we face. Life becomes not just a series of random events, but a journey that is part of a much larger cycle, one that stretches beyond this lifetime. Understanding samsara encourages us to take a step back and view the ups and downs of our lives from a broader perspective. Instead of seeing our hardships as purely negative experiences, we can recognize them as opportunities for growth, learning, and transformation. In a way, every challenge becomes a part of a greater journey, a moment in a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And when we realize this, we can develop a deeper sense of introspection. We begin to ask ourselves, what can I learn from this experience? How can I respond with compassion and understanding, both for myself and others? This perspective helps us become more mindful of how our actions, thoughts, and emotions impact our future, not just in this life, but in future ones as well. The wisdom of samsara encourages us to practice mindfulness, a key principle in Buddhism that helps us live in the present moment with full awareness. By being mindful, we are not only able to see our suffering and attachments more clearly, but we also gain the ability to reduce suffering in our lives. When we act with intention and awareness, we begin to understand that each moment is an opportunity to practice compassion and kindness, to make choices that create positive karma, and to ultimately steer ourselves toward a more peaceful, enlightened future. Now, you might be wondering, how can we practice mindfulness and compassion in our everyday lives? Truth is, the path to a more positive rebirth isn't about making grand gestures, it's about the small, everyday acts that we can do. Every time you help someone, offer a kind word, or act ethically in your interactions with others, you are creating positive karma. When we help a friend in need, share our resources with someone less fortunate, or simply take a moment to smile at a stranger, we're putting good energy into the world, creating ripples of positive influence that extend beyond this lifetime. These small acts might seem insignificant at first, but in the grand scheme of the cycle of samsara, they contribute to shaping our future. For example, let's say you help a neighbor with their groceries, or you volunteer at a local shelter. These are acts of kindness that create positive karma, not just because you're doing something good for someone else, but because they are expressions of compassion and selflessness. This is exactly what Buddhism teaches, that every action has consequences, and those consequences shape our future experiences, both in this life and in future rebirths. Mindfulness is key to improving not just the quality of our present moment, but also the quality of our future. When we start making conscious decisions about how we treat others and how we respond to challenges, we're sowing seeds for a more peaceful and compassionate future. And the beauty of this is that these practices don't require perfection, they just require consistency and intention. Every small, mindful act counts. Even when we make mistakes or fall short, the act of returning to mindfulness and trying again creates growth and positive momentum in our lives. But mindfulness also teaches us something else that's equally important: peace is accessible in the present moment. Often, we look for peace in the future or think that we'll only find peace once we've achieved certain goals or solved our problems. But Buddhism teaches us that true peace is available right now, in this very moment, if we are willing to embrace it. The key is letting go of attachment to outcomes, to desires, to the need for things to be a certain way. The more we let go, the more we open ourselves to the peace that is always available in the present moment. By understanding samsara and the cycle of rebirth, we begin to see that we don't have to hold on so tightly to anything. We don't have to chase after fleeting pleasures or fear what may come in the future. Every moment we experience is an opportunity to embrace life with gratitude, to recognize its impermanence, and to make choices that align with our higher purpose. Peace doesn't need to be a distant goal, it can be found right now, in the way we approach life's challenges, in the way we relate to others, and in the way we understand the nature of our existence. In conclusion, understanding samsara and rebirth doesn't just help us understand the world beyond this life, it helps us live more fully in the here and now. It encourages us to see our challenges as part of a greater cycle, to cultivate mindfulness and compassion in every moment, and to act in ways that create positive karma for the future. By doing so, we are not only improving our own lives, but also contributing to the collective good. We're moving toward a future of greater peace, greater wisdom, and ultimately, freedom from the cycle of samsara. So, as we continue to navigate our lives, let's remember that peace is always accessible in the present moment, if we are willing to embrace it with open hearts and clear minds. Inspiring stories and examples. Now that we've explored the profound teachings of samsara, let's bring these ideas to life with some powerful stories that illustrate the wisdom of Buddhism and how the cycle of rebirth and suffering plays out in the world around us. First, let me share with you a Zen story that beautifully conveys the teachings of samsara and karma. There's a famous Zen story that goes like this. A Zen master was walking along a riverbank when he came across a young man who was sitting by the water, looking deeply troubled. The Zen master asked him, "Why are you so sad?" The young man replied, "I have been searching for happiness for many years, but I can't find it. I feel as though no matter where I go or what I do, I'm stuck in the same cycle of disappointment and pain. I can't escape my suffering." The Zen master looked at him and said, "You are like a man who is trying to cross a river, but keeps jumping back in after each failed attempt. Every time you try to reach the other side, you swim halfway and then turn back, only to try again the next day. You must stop swimming against the current and allow the river to carry you. In doing so, you'll reach the other shore, which is peace." The story of the young man trying to cross the river beautifully exemplifies the principle of samsara. Just like the man who repeatedly swims against the current, many of us keep struggling with the same issues over and over, trying to fix things without understanding that true liberation comes not from constant effort but from letting go of attachments and desires. The Zen master's advice, to stop fighting the current, is a lesson about accepting the flow of life, recognizing that our suffering often comes from resistance to the natural rhythms of the world. In the context of samsara, this story highlights how our attachment to personal desires, expectations, and the need for control keeps us stuck in the cycle of suffering and rebirth. By releasing that attachment and surrendering to life's flow, we can break free from the cycle of samsara and experience true peace. Now, let's take a look at a real-world example that ties these teachings together in a modern context. Consider the story of someone like Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen master who spent his life teaching others how to live mindfully, embrace compassion, and transform suffering. Thich Nhat Hanh was a well-known peace activist who dedicated much of his life to healing the wounds of war and fostering peace in the world. He grew up during the Vietnam War, a time of immense suffering and destruction. Despite the chaos around him, he was determined to live with compassion and peace, teaching others how to do the same. In his early years, Thich Nhat Hanh faced immense personal suffering. He witnessed the devastation of his country, the loss of friends and family, and the overwhelming sense of hopelessness that pervaded his society. However, rather than becoming consumed by this suffering, he turned to Buddhist practice. Through mindfulness and meditation, he was able to gain insight into the nature of his suffering, recognizing that it was not permanent and that it was part of a larger cycle. He understood that the key to liberation wasn't to fight against suffering but to transform it through awareness, compassion, and action. Thich Nhat Hanh's work didn't stop with his own personal transformation. He went on to teach others how to apply the principles of Buddhism in their daily lives, helping people break free from the attachments and desires that keep them trapped in samsara. He taught that true peace comes from within, that by cultivating mindfulness and compassion, we can create a world that reflects the wisdom of liberation. His teachings have touched millions of people worldwide, and he has helped countless individuals find purpose and meaning even in the most challenging circumstances. This example serves as a powerful reminder that transformation is possible, no matter how entrenched we may feel in our suffering. Just like Thich Nhat Hanh, we, too, can use the teachings of Buddhism to transform our pain and suffering into a source of strength and compassion. By practicing mindfulness, detaching from the desires that keep us in samsara, and embracing the wisdom of impermanence, we can start to break free from the cycle of rebirth. And just like the Zen master's story of the river, we can let go of our resistance and allow the natural flow of life to guide us toward peace. For you, as a viewer, this is an invitation to reflect on your own life. Think about the areas where you feel stuck or trapped, whether it's in your relationships, your work, or your personal struggles. The principles of samsara and rebirth teach us that suffering is a natural part of life, but it doesn't have to define us. Just like Thich Nhat Hanh or the Zen master's young man, you, too, can break free from the cycle of suffering. By practicing mindfulness, cultivating compassion, and releasing attachment to the outcomes of your desires, you can start to transform your suffering into a deeper understanding of life's true nature. So, whether you're facing personal challenges or simply seeking a greater sense of peace in your life, remember that transformation is possible. You are not doomed to remain stuck in the cycle of samsara. Like the Zen master's story in Thich Nhat Hanh's example, you have the power to break free and live a life filled with purpose, compassion, and wisdom. The key is in how you respond to your circumstances. By embracing the teachings of Buddhism, you can create a life that reflects the peace and freedom that come from liberation. As we come to the end of this exploration into samsara and rebirth, it's important to reflect on the bigger picture, how this ancient wisdom applies to our everyday lives. The key takeaway here is that by truly understanding and accepting the cycle of samsara, we can live more meaningful, peaceful, and fulfilling lives. We often think of life as a series of random events or challenges that we must face, but in reality, everything we do, think, and feel is part of a larger cycle, a flow that's shaped by our actions and intentions. By acknowledging samsara, we realize that the suffering we experience is not just some unfortunate random occurrence, but rather the result of causes and conditions. It's our attachment to desires, our ignorance, and our aversion to things we can't control that bind us in this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. But when we understand this, we also understand that we don't have to be trapped. We have the power to change the way we experience life, to make our lives more meaningful by shifting our thoughts, our actions, and how we relate to the world around us. The quality of our actions, our thoughts, and our intentions has a direct influence on our lives and on the cycle of rebirth. If we approach life with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, we are sowing seeds for a future free from suffering. Every small act of kindness, every moment of mindfulness, every thought that is rooted in understanding and love adds to the positive karma that influences not just our present life, but potentially our future ones as well. By living with awareness of this cycle, we are empowered to break free from the negative patterns that bind us, and we can start creating a life of peace, happiness, and liberation. This is why it's so important to pause and reflect on how we are living in this very moment. What are our thoughts and actions doing to shape our future? Are we living in alignment with wisdom and compassion, or are we being driven by unexamined desires and attachments? Every moment is a chance for us to make a new choice, to break free from the suffering that comes with living blindly, and to embrace the freedom that comes from understanding the truth of samsara. Now, I want to leave you with this final thought. As we understand the cycle of samsara, we learn that by living with kindness, wisdom, and compassion, we can transform not just our lives, but the world around us. These are not just words, they are a call to action. When we live our lives with a sense of purpose, grounded in the wisdom of the Buddha's teachings, we contribute to the transformation of the world. Each action of compassion, every moment of understanding, every effort to relieve suffering, these ripples of kindness extend beyond ourselves and help create a world where peace, love, and understanding are possible. So, I encourage you to take this knowledge and apply it to your own life. Understand that every thought and action counts, that you are shaping your future in every moment. And as you do, you'll not only find peace within yourself, but you'll also be part of the greater transformation that makes this world a better place. Let's walk the path together, step by step, out of the cycle of samsara, and into a life of wisdom, peace, and liberation. Now that we've delved deeply into the teachings of samsara and rebirth, it's your turn to engage with these powerful ideas. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've discussed today. Do you feel like samsara and the cycle of rebirth resonate with your personal experiences? Do you have any questions, or perhaps you've had moments in your life where you've been able to break free from the attachments and desires that bind us to this cycle? Please, take a moment and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation. Whether you're new to these teachings or have been on this path for some time, your perspective is valuable, and we can all learn from each other's experiences. If you have questions or want to dive deeper into any part of today's discussion, feel free to ask. I'm here to help guide you on this journey of self-discovery and mindfulness. Also, if you found this video helpful and you want to explore more about Buddhist wisdom, spiritual growth, and how to live a life filled with peace and purpose, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on future videos where we'll continue exploring these transformative teachings and practical tips for living a more mindful and compassionate life. It's all about building a community where we can learn and grow together, and I'd love to have you join us on this journey. And finally, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on your own life. Think about the moments when you felt trapped in cycles of suffering, attachment, or desire. How might understanding samsara help you find peace and purpose in these situations? By contemplating these ideas and applying them to your daily life, you can start making small, intentional changes that will not only benefit you but also those around you. Life is a continuous process of growth, and with the wisdom of Buddhism, we can navigate it with greater awareness, compassion, and insight. So, I invite you to reflect deeply, engage with the community, and take the next step in your journey toward liberation and peace. Remember, every step counts, and as you move forward, you'll be creating a life of wisdom, kindness, and purpose. Thank you for being here today, and I look forward to continuing this journey with you.